Well, I'm going to tell two stories. One on how Kivgiq got started, singing and dancing, and it's given every other year here. And it died for a time, but they brought it back because from the stories that our elders, when I was a little tiny girl, I guess they talked about it, and my parents' age started talking about it, and and then they brought it back, and so it's given every other year. So next February should be the time they have the next Kivgiq, and so I'll talk tell a story about that, and then the other one is a raven story on how we started whaling, and so. And we'll go from there. There's more, but we'll see how things are. And I'm open to questions and everything, so feel free to do that.
I don't think I have anything right off the bat myself.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the time, as I'm telling stories too. So, or when the story is over, then we can discuss it a little bit if you want, and then we'll go on to the next one. Okay.
Great.
So the first one is about Kivgiq, and there was a time when there were so few people up here in the North Slope, and this is a story that came from Knut Rasmussen, who came from Greenland, and he dog teamed in 1920, and it took him, he came here in 1924, so he dog teamed for 4 years, and he would stop wherever he was, and because the language, he could understand the language, but there were some dialectal differences, and so he would stop long enough to learn their dialect, and then he would go hunting with them and come back at night, and they would tell stories, and he would hear these stories, and he'd write them down and send them off to Denmark. And he was a half Inuit from Greenland. His mom was an Inuit, and his dad was from Denmark. And they lived in northern part of Greenland. And so he grew up there, and so he decided, and then he was also educated, and he knew the language from his mom, and so he dog teamed and would stop every now and then all through Canada and then all through Alaska north, and he went on to Russia even, but he crossed without permission. And he talked to some people there, but then the authorities kicked him out, and so he came back to Alaska in a ship, and then he went back home to Greenland. But in the meantime, he was collecting these stories and sending them, and we would have lost this if he hadn't written it down, because Kivgiq stories eventually stopped, and the story got lost. And but then when the elders heard it, they said, "Yeah, I remember that story when I was a little kid. We used to tell this. They used to tell us stories." And so this is this comes from Knut Rasmussen. It's a Knut, K-N-U-T, Rasmussen. I'm going to start with the story now. And this is about our area. The story comes from our area, from the Colville River. And this comes from the time immemorial. Nobody even knows when this happened, but there were so few people in the North Slope, and all they did was hunt and work and hunt and work and fish and take care of their food and just trying to survive. That's all they did. And one day it was getting to be summer. It was springtime. They had already gone duck and geese hunting, and it was really starting to melt when there was a young man who lived with his parents, and he went out towards inland, and he saw this flying object getting closer and closer right towards him. And when it went above, it started circling, and he landed right in front of him and took his, it was a big eagle, and he took his eagle face off and became a human, and wanted him to come and come with them to the mountains and learn how to sing and dance. And he had no idea what singing and dancing was, and he refused. And he got killed. And so the parents looked for him, crying, and they never found him. And soon they had a second son, and he went out hunting, and he too disappeared. And they went out looking for him, and they never found him again, just like the first son. Then finally they had a third son, and this one seemed to be so much quicker in picking things up, and even though the first two were really good hunters, this one seemed to be smarter, and he learned things really quick, and so he started growing up, and he wanted to go inland to go hunting, but his parents said, "No, you can't. We lost our two sons, and you can't go up there, and you got to." But eventually they let him go a little ways, and next day he would go a little bit farther and a little bit farther, but he always came back to make sure, because his parents were always insisting that he came back home. And finally he went out quite a ways that one day, and he too saw a flying object, and it was a huge bird, and when it started circling and circling and circling and came closer and closer and landed right in front of him. And he too took his bird face back like this and became a human, and his coat was still feathered and like a huge eagle, and they started talking, and he said, I want to take you back to my mother in who lives in the mountains, and she wants to teach you how to sing and dance, and humankind is very you're always sad, and you need singing and dancing, because you won't survive without singing and dancing much longer. You're just barely surviving just by hunting and fishing, and so he got curious and said, yes, I'll go with you. And also the eagle had said, I killed your two brothers because they wouldn't come with me. And so he had no choice. So he said, okay, I'll come with you. And so he got on the shoulders and back of the shoulders like this of this eagle man, and the eagle man put his eagle face back down, became eagle, and then they just took off. And here he was holding on. He was so scared. He couldn't even look, and all he could hear while with his eyes closed was the sound of the eagle's wings just flapping. And so they flew, and after a while he started opening his eyes a little bit. Oh my gosh, they were flying, and he would look a little bit more, and pretty soon he started looking around, and how beautiful it was from up there. And he could see the mountains in the distance, and they flew towards there, and when they reached the Brooks Range, they went to the tallest mountain. That's where the eagle mother was, and went to the tallest mountain. And they started circling, and then he saw a little sod house down there. He was amazed that it was just like any other sod house, and so he thought it was going to be a huge something, but it was just a little sod house. And they landed there, and they started walking towards the sod house, and he could hear a boom, boom, boom. And he asked the eagle man, what is that? And he said, that's the sound of my eagle mother's heart. It's a heartbeat that you hear, and it's getting weaker and weaker. And so when they went inside, there was a little old lady so shriveled up, and she was just shaking. She was so old, just shaking, and she was laying down, and she was trying to sit up, and with a lot of effort she finally sat up, and she started saying, Adiga, Kai Marutin. Oh, Adiga, I'm so glad you came here. We got to learn how to sing. You got to learn how to sing and dance. And so we're going to hold a big festival. It'll be called Kivgiq. And he had no idea what that was. And she started talking about making drums, and he didn't know what a drum was, and singing, and he didn't know what singing was, but he just went along and said, okay, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And so the first thing she had them do was to construct a big kadre. Kadre is a community house. and it was huge. And she had to tell them how to build it exactly so it doesn't cave in. It was just a big, huge sod house, and so she showed them how to do it so that he will know how to build it. And so that's the first thing that they did. And then when that was done, they would also go hunting, and she would tell them, you're going to do a lot of hunting and fishing and make these sirloaks. They used to make small caches, but they went really deep and big, like the ice cellars that we have today. And so, because you're going to need to start filling the sirloak with a lot of food, because you're going to be feeding a lot of people. And so she showed them how to do that, and they did that. And then, but and also said you're going to have to do a lot of making kayaks, making sleds, the unyat. You're going to have to make umiaks, the big boats, and you're going to need to make a lot of harpoons and bows and arrows, and make fancy parkas. And she showed him how the fancy parkas were made, and so he learned all that. It was like him going away to school, and he learned how to do all that. And then they learned finally, when everything was set and how things are supposed to be collected, you're going to have to make a lot more things, like mittens and dancing mittens, some headgear, and they all, finally she said, you're going to learn how to make drums. And so they made a drum, and being inland, they made it from the guts, the membrane of the caribou, the tutu. And so that's how they made the first drums. And and she showed them how to bend the wood just right with the steam, and so they constructed a drum, and then he tried it, and boom, boom, boom. He said, it sounds just like your heart. And this lady, in the meantime, she's starting to move around a little bit better. She's starting to, as the time went by, she's starting to move around a little more. She's getting up a little quicker, but she's still pretty old. And so she's telling them how to. So these two young guys, the eagle young man and the young man that he picked up, are doing most of the work, and she's telling them how to do it. And then she said, we're not done yet. We're going to make a kalukak. And so this is the box drum. The kalukak is the box drum made from wood, and has in those days, they didn't have the nails or anything to build it with. They had to make little grooves to fit like this, and to make a box drum. And so they learned how to do that, and they put a handle on it, and oh my gosh, that was boom, boom, even louder than the regular round drums. And so they learned how to do that, and then finally she showed them how to dance. And so she said, the women, how they dance is, you know how we don't go like this, and so it's like flying. We're supposed to go like we're flying, and we're looking down. And so if you see some old ladies dancing, they're always looking down, and they're dancing like this. Young people nowadays, they go like this, you know, and yeah, they're looking around, laughing, and talking, but the traditional way is to look down, and you're like flying. So she showed them how to do that, and the men. She told her eagle son to dance, and you know how they dance like they're strong and proud, and getting lower. The lower you get, the better dancer you are, and so you have to have really strong legs, and so to show strength, that's how the men dance. And so finally he learned how to dance, and he had never danced before, and he just loved it. It made his heart so happy, and he had never felt this happiness before. And he also learned how to sing, drum and sing at the same time, and they showed him some of the songs, and so finally he had learned everything there was to learn. And so she said, "You're ready to go back. So you're going to show your parents and everybody all around you how to sing and dance, and you're going to have this great big Kivgiq." And so he said, "I know I've always lived with my mom and dad." At that time, mom and dad was not introduced. Mom and dad, in traditional days, mom was Aka and dad was Appa. And so now, today, it has switched with the introduction of mom and dad. Aka and Appa has switched to grandmother and grandfather. But in the old days, it was Aka and Appa for parents.
And doesn't that go back to when a lot of the parents got sick and died from, like during the first contact?
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
Young kids had to go live with their grandparents.
Yeah, but also any living language always changes.
Yeah.
Any living language always changes.
That's
yeah,
classified.
yeah. And so Akanapa has now become grandparents, and grandparents used to be Ana and Adada, which has now become great uncle, great aunt, and Amao is still the same, the great grandparents. But anyway, he said, "I've always lived with my Aka and Appa, so and I've heard that there are other people, but I myself have never met other people. And so where are all these people coming from? You said we're going to have a big feast, and we have to get ready for a lot of people." And she said, "Don't worry about it. When you are ready, after you've built your kadri and the sirloak to store your food, and all your gifts are ready, and all the drums and your kalukak drum is made, when everything is ready, you're going to see people come 2 by 2. And so when the time comes, you're going to see them 2 by 2. They're going to keep coming. And so just invite them, tell them to go eat, and when they're all there, then you'll start Kivgiq. And so he got they said their goodbyes, and by then, 2-3 years had gone by, and so he's got back on the shoulders of the eagle man, and the eagle man put his face back down to become an eagle, and off they flew towards the coast. And so they flew, and but when he saw his parents' little sod house, they didn't go directly there. They landed like maybe about a mile. They started circling, and went down and landed there. And they said their goodbyes. And after they said their goodbyes, the eagle man took off, flew towards the mountains. And so this guy started walking. Pretty soon he started running and hollering, "Aka, Appa, I'm here." And at that time, his parents were in the sod house. They were eating. Hardly ever talk anymore because they lost their third son. And then their father says, "You hear something?" And she said, "Yeah, I hear something." So they went out to look, and they couldn't believe their eyes. There was their son running, and they started running towards him, and when they reached each other, they hugged, and they laughed, and they cried at the same time, and they were all talking at once. And their son was telling them, "I got to show you how to sing and dance. I got to show you how to make we're going to have a big festival called Kivgiq, and I got to show you how to make drums and kalukak and all these things." And they thought he'd been away for so long that they thought maybe he went a little crazy. And so but they were so happy to see him, they just agreed with him. They just, "Yeah, we'll do whatever, then come and eat." And so they ate, and he kept on talking about these new things that they're going to do, but pretty soon they started realizing, yeah, it can be done. And so they started building this big qadri. Him and his father started building it. And to their amazement, it was a big community house. And so they built that. Then they made a big sirloq. And so they made like little rooms. This one's going to be for fish. This one's going to be for ducks and geese. And this is going to be for all the sea mammals. And, they just, and lots of ice for drinking water. And so so they started getting ready. They were hunting all the time and bringing things back, making sure they stored it properly. And the mother, she was busy sewing, made herself a parka, a fur parka. They're called Kivgiqsuat. so she started making these, and then she made lots of them. Over the years that they were preparing, she made lots of them, and she made lots of hunting mittens and regular mittens and dancing mittens, and they made headgear with feather in the front, and they made drums, and the mother and father were amazed at how much noise that they made, and not only that, he showed them how to sing. And so every night they would sing and dance, and they've never felt so happy. And so so every night they would just relax and sing and dance. And so all these preparations were being made. It took another 2-3 years to prepare everything. And they made a Kivgiq drum too, and used a stick to do it. And it's Kivgiq symbolizes a new year. That's why even when we don't have Kivgiq, we still have a Kivgiq, and it's usually done right after a new year, when the sun first comes back. And so Kivgiq dance is done like a line dance, and so it's to welcome visitors, to welcome the sun. It's a brand new year, and time to start cleaning up your cellars. It's a time to clean up your place for a new year. And so when everything was ready, and they made all their kayaks, all their sleds and boats, and lots of bows and arrows, and qilamitowns, the things to catch birds with. They're like, they've got a handle, with a lot of, it's bola. And so to catch birds. And so they made all kinds of things. And when everything was prepared, they said, it's time. And it was like when the sun first arrived, they were all ready. And he went hunting like he usually did. He walked out there towards inland, and he saw 2 people start getting closer, and he saw 2 more in the distance starting to come. And so he invited them, and the first people were dressed in all wolf, and the next 2 were dressed in all wolverine, and the next 2 were, all the foxes, different kinds of foxes, white fox, and next 2 were the Kivgiq, the red fox, and all the animals, Arctic animals. They came 2 by 2, and they were dressed in all the Arctic animals. And so he invited them all and told them, go to that Kivgiq down there, and so go eat. And so when they stopped coming 2 by 2, he himself started walking to the Kivgiq, and they ate, and then they took out the drums, And the three of them, the mother and father and the young man, started drumming. And everybody was just amazed. They had never seen anything like it before. And they started singing. And pretty soon the young man got up and started dancing, like the men, and stomping their feet and being real strong looking. And then the mother got up and started dancing like the way she was taught, and pretty soon all the people started joining in. They had so much fun, and it was days. They were just celebrating for days. They just eat, dance, and sleep, and eat, dance, and sleep, and and they took out the Kivgiq on the last night. They decided it's going to be the last night. Took out the Kivgiq, and they started practicing, and they said, "Oh, we can do it this way." And they did a line dance, like how they always do it. And this is to welcome other people that come in, and so and in the future Kivgiqs, that's what they would do. When other people from other places would come, the host would do the Kivgiq and to welcome them. And but anyway, they did the Kivgiq, and they danced, and they had a gift giving that night, and they gave lots of these gifts. They were just amazed as to how much there was, and they said, we'll keep on having Kivgiq every few years, and traditionally it would be held every 3 or 4 years, sometimes 5, depending on how much food there is. They would, and the host, they would have races like we do, but they were longer races, and whoever finished first would host the next Kivgiq. And even then, they did not only the race, but they had to do a high kick. They had to kick this ball that was way up there, and so whoever came in first, did a high kick, kicked it, would be the sponsor of the next Kivgiq, and they would have to get ready. And so that's how Kivgiq really got started. And so, and it also depended on who was able to sponsor enough people, to feed enough people. And so they would have to hunt a lot and have to make a lot of gifts, and they would be the host of the next Kivgiq. But anyway, the next day, after the Kivgiq night, when they said their goodbyes and then they were going to leave, in those days they didn't have doors like we do. They had to get on their hands and knees and, crawl out because they had little doors to keep the draft from coming in. So as these people, the first 2 pairs that were dressed in all wolf, when they got on their hands and knees, they became wolves. And the 2 that were dressed in all wolverines, they became wolverines. And so they became, these Arctic animals had come to celebrate the very first Kivgiq, and they helped to celebrate this. And so until more and more people heard about it, and they started sponsoring these Kivgiqs, and then pretty soon it became all humans. But that very first one was with the help of the Arctic animals that had transformed themselves from becoming animals into humans, because in those days they transformed quite a bit. There was always transformation. There's lots of transformation stories of animals becoming humans and humans becoming animals. And so they became those animals. They scattered, and pretty soon, over the years, more and more humans started coming in, and they learned how to sing and dance. So that was how they first learned how to do the singing and dancing, and how to make drums, and how to hold that Kivgiq. And so this young man, he was starting to hunt again. His father would always go hunt at the sea, and he would always go inland. And so he started walking inland again, and he saw a flying object coming. And he knew that was his friend, the Eagle Man. And so he started circling, got closer and closer, and landed right in front of him. And this time they just hugged each other, hadn't seen each other for a long time. And he said, "You did well. I've heard stories about the first Kivgiq, and you did well. And so my mother, my Eagle mother, would like to thank you. So can you travel with me once more and into the mountains?" And he said, "Yeah, I would love to." So he got on his shoulders, and the guy put down his eagle face back on, and off they went towards the mountains. And so when they started circling around to land and get closer, the Eagle mother came out of the house, and she was walking around and waving at them. And when they landed, she actually looked younger. How could this be? And so he asked her, how could you be younger? And she said, "Because you learned how to sing and dance, it makes me younger." And so every time we do singing and dancing, the Eagle mother becomes younger. And so that's how he went back home, and he talked more about this Eagle mother, and so he said she was actually younger. And so it marvels me to see my dad, who is 90 years old. When he dances, he looks younger. He really does. And all these young old people, they actually do look younger when they're singing and dancing. Something happens. They are light on their feet. They're very lively. So I think of this Eagle mother every time I see the old people dancing, and how limber they look. But in every day, they're barely, getting up. swaying a little bit, you know, when they walk. But when they're up there and dancing, they're very limber. So that's the story about the first Kivgiq. Yeah. So that's why we have singing and dancing now, because it was taught to us from the eagle man and his mother, the eagle mother.
Thank you. Just
So.
a quick question. With her getting younger, does she serve any other purpose? Like, is she in charge of any major mechanism that helps the world run, or?
I don't know. That's a story that that was told. So they didn't say anything like that. Like, yeah.
Like, does she hold the world together or something?
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier, but birds are so important. Could you maybe explain why you think birds are so important in so many of these stories? Because there's ravens, there's eagles. I mean, why are birds so important?
Maybe because they fly. They have, like, they're supernatural. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Something man can't do.
Yeah. Something
Symbols
man
of
can't
hope.
do. Yeah.
Especially with the sadness that all humans feel
Mm-hmm.
when they dance, they kind of regain hope.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
And that
Mm-hmm.
is something that's
Yeah.
universal across. Is that birds?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems to me this story is one of the themes of this story, or the lessons of this story, is there's more to life than just the basic necessities, food, shelter.
Yeah.
To have a good life, you have to have art.
Yeah.
And community.
Yeah.
Culture. And culture, right?
Yeah.
In the version that I read, it was emphasized more about the first son only wanting to learn one type of weaponry, and then the second son was willing to learn a little bit more than that, but the third son was willing to learn everything.
Oh,
And that was another part of like him willing to just learn new things.
Yeah.
Was a big
Yeah.
part of the moral of the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Are children disappearing or dying common in the stories you've heard?
Not really. Yeah. Yeah. Overcoming obstacles, mainly.
Right.
Yeah.
And being open to new things, learning
Yeah.
new things.
Yeah.
And of course, the animals turning into humans and humans turning into animals is so common, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we feel that there's power that comes from animals too. And so that's why you have to, like, if you catch a tutu, the very first thing that, when I was able to start hunting, very first thing that my grandfather and my father, because I was the oldest, they taught me how to hunt. When I got my first tutu, the caribou, first thing that they told me to do was that I need to put a hole through here and let the spirits out. Before I start butchering. So that's the first thing that they showed me how to do, was to put a knife there, right in here, let the spirits out, and then I can start butchering.
And you know, in some stories, when the devil takes your soul, if you sell your soul to the devil, he takes it out of the back of your head.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's in Japan too. That's why when you perform, well, actually no. Oh, I got it backwards. It comes out of the stomach.
Yeah.
But the first people that, the first samurais that would honor killing, they cut off their head, and then they realized that the soul was trapped in the stomach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird how these things connect from different cultures
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In that Kivgiq God, it said that the soul's trapped in the chest if it's not released through the head. Something like that.
Interesting. What about this circling kept coming up? I know it's the flight of a bird, but are circles common in other stories that you've heard?
The loon had to circle the lake to let this blind boy see again.
I thought it was a swan.
Yeah. Well, the one I've heard is it's probably there's probably different versions,
Oh, okay.
but the one I heard was a loon.
That's
yeah.
a good one. I
Yeah.
like that one.
Yeah.
Are there other connections to Greenland?
Oh, the man with the whale on his back.
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah,
tattoo.
yeah. The tattoo one. Yeah. Yeah.
A man gets lost out on ice. He ends
Uh-huh.
up floating all the way to Greenland.
Yeah.
And he has a family there, and then he finally makes it back to Barrow doing the same thing, and they don't believe him. So he goes back to Greenland, and it takes years to go between the two in the story. And so he finally comes back, and he has a tattoo of a whale in the middle of his back to show them that he wasn't lying.
And that's probably just because of the subpolar connection between these places, right?
Yeah. They traveled quite a bit in those days.
Yeah.
Here they had dog teams and boats, only through oaring, and we barely make it anywhere with our airplanes.
Right. But even the idea of the drum sounding like the heart, shows you how like music is life and life is music. And,
Yeah.
And the fact that they're made out of animals and not, synthetic materials,
Yeah.
real materials.
Yeah. And today we usually take the membrane of the whale. I think it's the liver. Because it's thinner than the stomach membrane, and so